Hi, good morning. I'm so sorry. I'm super embarrassed.
Yeah.
Hi, puppy.
Let me get.
This man is 74-year-old John Arthur Getreu, an elderly homeowner in Hayward, California. What he doesn't know is that he's speaking with an undercover officer closing in on a decades-old secret, and things are about to take an unexpected turn.
I was turning around in your driveway and I accidentally hit your car.
Which one?
The one parked in the driveway. Do you want to maybe take a look to see if we should exchange insurance information?
Take a peek.
Oh man, I'm so sorry. So embarrassing.
Sheriff's office. Yeah. Go ahead. Hands behind your back. Face the car. Go ahead and face the car.
All right, what's this?
We'll talk to you in a minute. Anybody else in the house?
No, my wife's at work.
Deputies give John a routine pat-down before he's led to the front seat of a police vehicle.
Take a seat.
You want to rest on that
You're
seat?
gonna close the door, make sure the dogs.
Yes.
We'll take care of your dog.
Okay.
Yeah.
Though he hasn't been told why he's been arrested, John applauds the deputies for the ruse.
Good line for coming out of the house. Get that guy out of the house.
Months earlier, cold case investigators in Santa Clara County reopened a murder case that had remained unsolved for 45 years. DNA from the crime scene was compared to a public database, allowing investigators to trace a family tree and identify John, a husband, father, and former Boy Scout leader, as the primary suspect. Investigators bring him in for questioning, hoping to uncover the truth. Is this devoted husband and father simply the wrong man? Or has his carefully lived life been a cover for something far more sinister? The following is based on official police records, and most of the footage has never been seen before.
So I'm Sergeant Cortez, okay? I'll let you know what's going on and why you're here today.
Yeah,
okay?
I'd like to know.
Yeah, absolutely, of course. Before I let you know what's going on, I just want to get your personal information. Just confirm your name. Your full name is John Arthur
Getreu.
Getreu?
Getreu.
Okay. Were you ever in the military?
No.
No. Have you ever been arrested in the past?
No.
John shares basic information about his past and childhood, revealing that he was born in Newark, Ohio, and spent the early years of his life moving frequently due to his father's long military career. He spent a significant part of his teen years in West Germany, where his family lived on a U.S. military base.
Now, you mentioned that he had never been arrested. And I found out something happened in Germany.
Okay.
Can you tell me about that?
I was arrested in Germany.
Okay, what happened with that? Can you tell me about that?
I was accused of murder.
The revelation is especially jarring, given that he's here today on accusations of his involvement in a completely separate murder.
Tell me about what happened. What was the accusation against you?
I killed a chaplain's daughter.
Okay.
And that was all I knew.
Okay. Do you remember what happened?
No.
With this young female?
No.
No?
I didn't even know her.
The young girl, 15-year-old Margaret Williams, attended a dance at an American youth club one Saturday night in 1963, when John was just 18 years old. The two were said to have met on the street shortly after, where she agreed to let him walk her home. Her body was discovered the next day on a baseball diamond behind the club. She'd been sexually assaulted and strangled.
You didn't even know her? Why did they arrest you? I mean,
Probably the next day
Okay.
after they found the body, I guess.
Okay. How did they tie you to this body? How did they connect you to this body?
Somebody had seen me, walk that direction or walk towards a school, or
Okay.
it was an elementary school.
Okay. Did you... I mean, I don't know the details of what
I
happened.
don't know the details either, so
Okay. Did you actually meet this young lady?
that's what they say.
Though John maintains his innocence, he was found guilty at trial for Margaret's murder, ultimately receiving a sentence of 10 years in a German juvenile prison. Because of his age at the time, he was released after serving roughly 2/3 of his sentence. Then he walked free.
And so you spent actually 6 years in prison? over
Something
there?
like that.
Wow. And then how, after you were released, what happened?
I just was dropped off at McGuire Air Force Base, and my father picked me up, and that was it.
That was it? You came back to the
Never
United
heard
States?
a word from him. Nothing.
Okay.
After returning to the United States, John moved to California and in 1975 was once again at the center of a serious crime.
And then at some point, there was another accusation against you about a sexual assault from the Palo Alto Police Department?
Yeah, Palo Alto Police Department.
Okay.
That's when I was the leader of an Explorer post.
Okay. Can you tell me about what happened there?
Nothing.
Okay.
You know, I
It's
was
just
accused, interviewed, and that was it.
Okay. What's this allegation? I got to ask you.
Yeah.
You know, this allegation that this young girl made against you that you sexually assaulted her. Did that actually happen?
No, not that not that I know of. And if I was arrested for specifically that and then not even tried, and then nothing's happened. Like I told him, nothing happened.
Yeah.
I never saw her again. You know.
Did you end up serving time for that? Do you remember?
No, I didn't. I didn't serve any time that I know of.
Okay.
I can't. You know.
Okay.
It was so piddly that.
It didn't.
Yeah.
You weren't. Didn't go to trial or anything
No.
like that. Okay.
According to multiple news sources, John was 31 years old when the teenager came forward, claiming he not only assaulted and strangled her, but threatened to kill her if she didn't comply. He received a 6-month sentence, serving just 30 days on weekends after 5 were suspended.
So I want to tell you a little bit about my investigation. Okay. Are you familiar with the with Palo Alto area, Stanford area, the hills in Stanford?
Yeah.
You ever go out there? You
I
ever,
was a scout leader. I traveled all those hills.
what hills? Which hills are you talking?
Well, we were out in the Bay, Half Moon Bay Hills,
Okay.
and I traveled up through there, hiked with the boys.
Did you ever go in the hills, like in the area around Page Mill Road? Page Mill Road, like just west of Stanford?
No.
No, you never went to that area?
No.
Okay. So I'm investigating there's a murder up there in the hills. And would there be any reason that you were ever up in those hills? No?
No.
Leslie Marie Perlov was a 21-year-old Stanford University graduate working as a law clerk at the North County Law Library in Palo Alto, California in 1973. Her body was found dumped in the Stanford Dish hiking area. A floral scarf was found tightly knotted around her neck and had been used as a ligature to strangle her to death. It was DNA found beneath her fingernails that led them to John, who at the time worked near the Stanford campus as a security guard.
You ever see this young lady? You know her?
No. Who's that?
It's a young lady that an investigation I'm doing, and she was murdered. Do you ever see her at all?
No.
She look familiar?
Leslie's 1972 orange Chevrolet Nova was found parked at the gate of an old quarry near Old Page Mill Road, just east of where her body was found.
Do you remember ever stopping by the side of the road and looking into this vehicle?
No.
It's an orange Chevy Nova.
No.
No?
No, sir.
Okay. Do you know the name Leslie Perlov? Leslie Perlov?
No.
No? Okay. She wasn't a girlfriend of yours?
Oh, no.
Okay. I had to ask.
She's cute anyway.
Yeah, very.
That would
very
be
cute.
about, she'd be about 18 years old, I guess.
Okay.
At Stanford. Yeah, Stanford graduate. Yeah. But that's it. I don't even recognize her.
Curiously, the sergeant hasn't shared with John that Leslie was a Stanford graduate.
Why do you say she's a Stanford graduate?
Well, just by the way she dresses and all in
Okay.
this area, you know.
Sure.
But, you know, I didn't say graduate either. I said, you know, she's a college kid.
Oh, okay. Now this young lady was obviously murdered, like I said. She was strangled.
Mm,
Would you ever think about doing anything like that?
nope.
I know that you were accused of a sexual
Yeah.
assault, right? Would you ever think about committing a sexual assault?
I have no reason for it.
And I'm going to ask you these tough questions
Yeah,
because
yeah,
it's just
yeah.
part of the investigation. When you were younger, did you ever fantasize about sexual assault?
It's what it sounds like by looking at my record.
Yeah. Or killing a young woman? Okay.
No.
In this investigation, if your DNA was on this young lady, why would you think your DNA was on her?
Haven't the slightest idea.
Were you involved in the murder of this young girl?
Nope.
As the sergeant continues to press for answers, John inches closer to a major mistake, not yet aware of what he's about to give away.
You know about DNA and how it's transferred, right?
Yeah.
What-
This can be how it's transferred. I can always just tell.
Okay, tell me about that.
Yeah, one is semen.
Okay,
One is from the mouth.
sure. Yeah.
That's the only two that I know of.
Okay.
Now, if there's some that are bodily, other than these two transferred, then it's totally different.
Okay. And you know about technology now, advances in
Top knowledge
technology.
is getting good.
Yeah. So there's.
They're catching them every day.
Yeah. How do you think your DNA would be on a person?
Don't know.
You don't know. Okay.
Especially this person or these two persons.
What two persons?
Well, that you're talking about.
Yeah.
The two young women.
Okay. I showed you a picture of that one young lady.
Yeah. No.
Okay. What's the second young lady?
The one up on the one up on the hill.
Okay.
Yeah. There's two different places you're talking about.
Okay. What's one of them's up on the hill?
Yeah.
Okay. And then up on what hill? Well, you mentioned the hill.
Yeah. You mentioned it.
I mentioned the hills.
Yeah.
Okay. And what's the other one? Because I don't remember another one.
Well, there's the two girls. There's not both the same place.
Okay. I mentioned one girl up on the hill.
Yeah, the okay, wherever she
Okay.
was, wherever the second girl was.
Oh, okay.
While the sergeant doesn't yet know it, another woman was found in the Palo Alto area in 1974, 1 year after Leslie's body was discovered. 21-year-old Janet Taylor was found dumped along Sandhill Road in the same Stanford Dish hiking area. According to news sources, she'd also been assaulted and strangled to death. The serial killer responsible for the deaths of both Leslie and Janet would escape justice for decades, until now.
I think I'm at a point in my investigation that,
I'm guilty, and that's it.
well, I'm trying, well, there's a couple things, John. Your DNA's on her.
yeah.
Okay. I'm not trying to find out who did it.
Mm-hmm.
What I'm trying to find out is why you did it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think you know more than you're telling me.
No, I wish I knew.
With John refusing to admit the truth, another investigator joins in the effort to obtain a confession, and the added pressure will soon tear his lies even further apart.
It's not an accident that your DNA got there. Your DNA and the type of DNA and where it is on the victim, there's no other explanation.
Mm-hmm.
You committed this crime. We know you committed this crime. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
What we don't know is why. And we're going to give you the opportunity to explain it to us.
You don't have to. I thought about it, and that's all I can think of. No.
Know what?
No, I'm not guilty.
Okay. Well, I'm telling you right now you are.
Okay, fine.
Okay? You had to have known this day was coming.
Yeah, I know that. But why it took so damn long?
As they push harder for the truth about Leslie, John once again lets slip that she wasn't the only one he left in the hills.
So why her?
I don't even know who she is. If that's the first girl or the one girl that's up on the hill or whatever,
What do you mean the first girl?
Well, he said there's two people. There's two girls. Unless I misunderstood him. They were killed within probably an hour of each other and 2 hours of each other, or day, or who knows.
Do you remember? How do you remember those details?
Some of the questions he's asked me.
Do you remember seeing any newspaper articles or media about those?
Nobody, but that girl there is not the other one that he showed me. If that's the girl there with, the other picture, I doubt it.
Why's that?
I mean, look at the body.
Mm-hmm.
It could be somebody else. I don't think they're the same one.
Is that why you don't recognize her?
No.
Because that's not the girl that you
I'm
killed?
not questioning. I don't recognize her. I've never seen her.
Do you think it was a different girl that you killed and that's not the one we're
I
showing
didn't
you?
kill any girl.
You didn't kill the girl in Germany?
No. Well, that's total different. That's when I was 18 years old or younger.
In a final confrontation, investigators forced John to face the mounting evidence against him.
There's a situation in Germany where a girl ends up dead and you weren't there.
Mm-hmm.
And we have a situation
Here. That was
years later after you came back to the States where a girl ends up dead and you say you weren't there, yet your DNA is there.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think the chances are of that happening?
I don't know.
What would you do if you were us and you were investigating this case? What would that look like to you?
There's a brick wall.
What do you mean there's a brick wall?
Well, I mean, you found out, you couldn't find out, so.
What do you mean I found out and I couldn't find
Oh,
out?
nothing. I'm just let it go.
Well, you understand it's my job not to let things like that go, right?
I have nothing else to say about it.
It's got to be quite a burden, John.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm going to put the questioning from here on, unless I'm represented by somebody in the courts.
What do you mean?
A lawyer.
You'd like a lawyer?
I like a lawyer.
Okay. Thanks, John.
After requesting a lawyer, the interrogation came to an end. But justice quickly caught up with 74-year-old John Arthur Getreu, who was arrested and booked into the Santa Clara County Main Jail with a $10 million bond. In January 2019, DNA from the torn crotch of Janet Taylor's underwear was also determined to be a match for John. In September 2021, a jury found him guilty of first-degree murder with infliction of great bodily injury in the killing of 21-year-old Janet Taylor. He was sentenced to 7 years to life in prison, finally putting a serial killer who had escaped justice for decades behind bars for good. In January 2023, he pleaded guilty to the murder of Leslie Perloff and received a second life sentence to be served consecutive with the first. According to multiple news sources, John Getreu died of natural causes on September 22, 2023, at the age of 79. His DNA remains in the state database and will continue to be compared against evidence from unsolved murders in the ongoing effort to close more cases.
Psychological analysis of John Arthur Getreu's criminal behavior. Introduction: John Arthur Getreu presents a chilling case study of a criminal who led a double life, an outwardly ordinary family man who secretly committed heinous acts of sexual violence and murder. For over 4 decades, Getreu evaded justice for a series of brutal crimes that began in his late teens. He was initially convicted of rape and murder in 1963 in West Germany, then later linked to 2 unsolved murders from 1973 and 1974 near the Stanford University campus in California in .wikipedia.org-almanacnews.com. In each known case, his victims were young women who were sexually assaulted and strangled. Yet during the long interval between these crimes and his eventual arrest in 2018, Getreu lived an apparently normal life, marrying, raising children, working steady jobs, and even serving as a Boy Scout leader and fraternal lodge officer in his community, people.com. This stark contrast between his public persona and his hidden crimes makes Getreu's psychology especially compelling to analyze. In this detailed analysis, we will explore the psychological and behavioral patterns that characterize John Getreu's criminal life. We will examine his early background and first offense, the series of Stanford murders in the 1970s, and their sexually violent nature, and the way he managed to integrate into society for years afterward without arousing suspicion. Key traits, such as his lack of remorse, manipulative deception, violent sexual impulses, desire for control, and ability to compartmentalize, will be identified and discussed in the context of criminal psychology concepts. We will also consider his behavior during interrogations and court proceedings, which further illuminate his mindset. By piecing together information from official records and witness accounts, we aim to understand how and why Getreu was able to commit such crimes and avoid accountability for so long, and what his case reveals about the mind of a serial sexual predator. Throughout, we will cite evidence from reports and expert analyses to support this psychological profile. The goal is to provide a comprehensive look at the criminal behavior of John Arthur Getreu, not only what he did, but the psychological mechanisms that enabled and drove these actions. Early life and first murder, 1963. John Arthur Getreu's early life gave little outward indication of the predator he would become. Born in 1944 in Ohio, he was one of 4 children in a U.S. Army family and spent much of his youth moving between military bases, both in the United States and abroad. Wikipedia.org. In 1960, as a teenager, he moved with his family to West Germany, where his father was stationed. Wikipedia.org. He attended an American high school there and was described later as having shown no signs of mental illness or suspicious behavior during his youth. Wikipedia.org and Wikipedia.org. Those who knew him in his teens generally regarded him as an ordinary young man. Wikipedia.org. There were no publicly noted incidents of cruelty to animals, fire setting, or other early warning signs of violent tendencies in his background. In short, from the outside, he appeared to have a relatively normal upbringing. This absence of obvious red flags makes the events of June 8, 1963, all the more startling. At age 18, John Getreu brutally raped and murdered a 15-year-old girl, revealing a capacity for extreme violence at a very young age. On that evening in 1963, Getreu attended a school dance in the town of Bad Kreuznach, West Germany, where the children of U.S. military personnel socialized. Wikipedia.org. There he met Margaret Mary Williams, the 15-year-old daughter of a U.S. Army chaplain who was also stationed in the area. Wikipedia.org. After the dance, Getreu offered to walk Margaret home. Instead of safely escorting her, he led her to a dark baseball field on the campus. In that secluded spot, he viciously attacked her, beating her severely and raping her. Wikipedia.org. Wikipedia.org. Margaret suffered grave injuries, including head trauma, and later died of those injuries. Wikipedia.org. It was a shocking crime. An ostensibly average American teenager had suddenly turned into a rapist and killer. Multiple witnesses had seen John and Margaret walking together that night, which quickly made him the prime suspect once her body was discovered. Wikipedia.org. When confronted by German authorities, the teenage Getreu's response foreshadowed the pattern of deceit he would use throughout his life. Initially, he flatly denied even meeting Margaret that night. Wikipedia.org. Only when pressed with witness accounts did he partially change his story, admitting that he had had sexual intercourse with her, but still denying that he killed her. Wikipedia.org. This early example of his behavior under scrutiny is telling. Rather than show panic or remorse, the 18-year-old Getreu tried to manipulate the narrative, conceding just enough truth that a sexual encounter occurred to explain evidence, yet refusing to accept responsibility for the fatal outcome. Such calculated lying at a young age suggests an emergent antisocial mindset. Even at 18, Getreu demonstrated the hallmark psychopathic trait of failing to accept responsibility for his actions, coupled with a willingness to deceive authorities. Wikipedia.org. His instinct was to protect himself through dishonesty, indicating a lack of empathy for his victim and a singular focus on self-preservation. Despite his denials, the evidence against Getreu in the Margaret Williams case was overwhelming. In June 1964, a German court found him guilty on all counts, rape and murder, and sentenced him to 10 years in prison, the maximum penalty available for a juvenile offender under West German law. Wikipedia.org. At sentencing, John Getreu appeared to express remorse. He apologized to the victim's family and behaved as though he regretted his actions. Wikipedia.org. It is important to scrutinize this apparent contrition in context. Given that he had spent the trial denying critical aspects of the crime, his apology may well have been opportunistic or superficial. Many offenders will display situational remorse once convicted in hopes of leniency, without truly feeling empathy or guilt. Indeed, Getreu's subsequent behavior strongly suggests that any remorse he showed was not deeply held. After serving only a portion of his sentence, he was released and went on to reoffend in similar ways. Thus, his apology can be interpreted as part of a pattern of manipulation. When denial failed and a guilty verdict was reached, he switched tactics to feigned remorse. This aligns with what is often seen in psychopathic individuals, who can display charm or regret when it serves their needs, yet do not internalize those emotions. As one forensic analysis notes, such offenders are callous and lack empathy, and show failure to accept responsibility for their own actions, even if they may superficially claim to be sorry in .wikipedia.org. John Getreu served about 6 years of his 10-year sentence in a German juvenile prison before being paroled for good behavior in .wikipedia.org. By all accounts, he was a compliant inmate, again indicative of his capacity to compartmentalize and adapt his behavior to avoid further punishment. Once free in 1969, at age 24, he was quietly deported back to the United States. German authorities presumably believed that a young offender had been rehabilitated or at least neutralized by his time behind bars. Unfortunately, that would prove to be a tragic miscalculation. Getreu's first murder at 18 revealed a violent sexual predilection that prison did not extinguish. Instead, he would carry that predatory impulse with him back to America, where it would resurface within just a few years. In psychological terms, the early onset of such extreme violence suggests a deeply ingrained antisocial pathology. Many serial offenders begin with less severe crimes and escalate, but Getreu's criminal trajectory was unusual in that his very first known offense was already a rape homicide, an extraordinarily violent act. This implies that whatever combination of factors, psychological, biological, environmental, contributed to his behavior, they were potent enough to manifest in lethal violence without a long ramp-up period. Some criminological research indicates that serial killers who start killing in their teens often have strong psychopathic traits or sexual deviances present from early on, in .wikipedia.org. In Getreu's case, the murder of Margaret Williams can be seen as the eruption of a violent fantasy life, one that likely involved domination and sexual aggression, into reality. It set the stage for his pattern of criminal behavior, sexual assault coupled with lethal violence, denial of responsibility, and later the ability to move on as if nothing happened. The Stanford Murders, 1973-1974. After his release from the German prison, John Getreu attempted to rebuild a normal life in the United States, at least on the surface. He settled for a time in Nevada and married a woman named Susan in 1970, n.wikipedia.org. By 1971, the couple had moved to Palo Alto, California, n.wikipedia.org, a community adjacent to Stanford University and part of the prosperous San Francisco Peninsula region. Getreu had no college education or specialized training, so he worked a series of blue-collar and service jobs. Notably, one of his positions was as a security guard and lab technician in the Stanford area stanfordmag.org. This is significant because it placed him in the vicinity of his next known victims. In the early 1970s, the Stanford campus and its surroundings were shaken by a string of murders, two of which would decades later be attributed to Getreu. The first was the killing of Leslie Marie Perloff in February 1973. Leslie was a 21-year-old Stanford graduate who worked at a Palo Alto law library, stanfordmag.org. On February 13, 1973, she went missing, and 3 days later her body was found in the hills in the Stanford foothills, an area known as the Stanford Dish Hiking Area, stanfordmag.org and .wikipedia.org. She had been strangled to death. A floral scarf was found knotted tightly around her neck, used as a ligature by the killer in .wikipedia.org. Her clothing was intact, but there was evidence of sexual assault. DNA later recovered from her body indicated the presence of semen from an unknown male perpetrator, and .wikipedia.org. At the time, however, in 1973, forensic science was not advanced enough to identify the attacker from such biological evidence. Investigators had no immediate suspects, and Leslie's case went cold, haunting the community for decades. Just over a year later, on March 24, 1974, a second young woman's body was discovered not far from the Stanford campus. Janet Ann Taylor, age 21, was found dead in a ditch alongside a remote stretch of Sand Hill Road and .wikipedia.org. She was the daughter of a well-known Stanford athletic coach, which heightened public attention on the case in .wikipedia.org. Like Leslie, Janet had been strangled and showed signs of sexual assault. Her clothing was torn, and her underwear later yielded semen evidence. almanacnews.com and .wikipedia.org. Janet had last been seen hitchhiking home in the area, suggesting she may have gotten into a car with her killer willingly or was picked up under false pretenses in .wikipedia.org. Her murder, coming so soon after Leslie's, intensified fears that a serial predator might be stalking women near Stanford University. In fact, the press began referring to the unsolved homicides collectively as the Stanford Murders, stanfordmag.org. Law enforcement at the time investigated various leads, even briefly considering whether infamous serial killers like Ted Bundy or the Zodiac Killer could be involved. stanfordmag.org. But no arrests were made in the Perlov or Taylor cases in the 1970s. Unbeknownst to everyone, the perpetrator was not a notorious drifter or a psychotic cultist, but John Getreu, a local married man and father who worked nearby and blended into the community. From a psychological and behavioral perspective, the murders of Leslie Perlov and Janet Taylor show John Getreu's criminal pattern in full form. Both victims were young women in their late teens or early 20s, the same age range as Margaret Williams, 15, had been, and as another of his victims would be. This consistency suggests Getreu had an ideal victim type, typically young, presumably attractive females who were likely strangers to him and .wikipedia.org. Criminal psychologists note that serial offenders often select victims that fit a particular fantasy or preference, and will pass over others who don't meet that criteria in .wikipedia.org. It appears Getreu was specifically inclined toward teenage or college-age women, perhaps because they represented a combination of youth and vulnerability that fueled his desires. He did not target older women or men. The focus was clearly sexual and gender-specific. We might infer a degree of misogyny or deep-seated aggression toward women in that age group, though it's also possible he simply found them the most sexually alluring and easier to overpower. His remark upon seeing Leslie Perlov's photograph years later, "She's cute anyway, rtheucpulse.com, is chilling evidence of how he viewed these victims. Even confronted with an image of a murdered woman, he reduced her to an object of sexual attraction with a casual, almost flippant tone. This dehumanization is a common element in the psychology of sexual killers, who often see their victims as expendable objects for gratification rather than as human beings. The method Getreu used in the Stanford area murders also provides insight into his psyche. Both Leslie and Janet were strangled, one with her own scarf, and the other likely with bare hands or a ligature. Strangulation is an intimate, violent way to kill. It requires close contact and a prolonged application of force. It is often associated with offenders who enjoy the power and control it gives them over the victim, as well as those who derive sexual excitement from the act of domination. Indeed, forensic studies of lust murderers note that strangling a victim can be a way for the killer to assert total power over them while prolonging the suffering, which can be gratifying to a sadistic personality. Scholarworks.gvisu.edu. In many cases of sexual homicide, the killer's act of throttling the victim is not just to silence or kill, but is part of the sexual fantasy itself. The victim's life, literally, in their hands. This seems likely for Getreu. The use of Leslie's own scarf as the murder weapon also suggests a certain opportunism and symbolic cruelty. He turned a personal item of hers into the instrument of death. It may also indicate he did not go into the encounter with a weapon prepared, which could mean the attack had some impulsive element, or that he was confident in using whatever was at hand to achieve his aims. Furthermore, the sexual aspect of these crimes cannot be overstated. Prosecutors later described Getreu's crimes as sexually motivated, emphasizing that rape or attempted rape was a central component. People.com. In Leslie's case, seminal fluid was recovered from her body, and in Janet's case, from her clothing, proving that Getreu either raped or attempted to rape both women in .wikipedia.org and .wikipedia.org. This firmly places him in the category of a lust murderer or sexually sadistic killer, as opposed to someone who kills for financial gain, revenge, or other reasons. His crimes align with what criminologists define as sexual homicide, where the act of murder is intertwined with sexual assault or gratification in .wikipedia.org. Research on such offenders indicates they often have persistent violent sexual fantasies and feel a compelling need to act them out in .wikipedia.org. Each successful crime can reinforce their fantasy life, sometimes escalating the level of violence over time. In Getreu's case, there was an escalation from the first murder. Margaret Williams was beaten and raped, but initially left alive. She died of injuries later. Whereas Leslie and Janet were strangled to death during or immediately after the assault, suggesting a more calculated completion of the homicidal act. It's possible that after his first crime, Getreu's violent fantasies evolved to ensure the victim's death as part of the experience, or he learned that leaving a victim alive risked identification. Another psychological facet evident in the Stanford murders is Getreu's confidence in planning. While we don't know exactly how he encountered Leslie Perloff, one detail stands out. Leslie's orange Chevrolet Nova was found parked near an old quarry gate by Page Mill Road, an area where she often went hikingpeople.com. It's plausible that Getreu, working or roaming in the vicinity, noticed her routine or followed her that day, choosing a location where she would be isolated. Similarly, Janet Taylor was hitchhiking at night, a situation that an opportunistic predator could exploit by offering a ride. In both cases, Getreu attacked in relatively secluded areas, reducing the chance of witnesses. The bodies were left outdoors, not concealed extensively, indicating that his primary concern was the act itself, rather than hiding the crime long-term. The fact that he was not caught at the time suggests a level of criminal skill or luck. He left behind evidence, semen, fibers, etc. But in the 1970s, those were not easily traceable to him. He also had no known prior connection to the victims, making it difficult for investigators to link him via the usual means of motive or association. In effect, he was an organized stranger offender, selecting victims who did not know him and leaving minimal immediate clues. This profile is consistent with psychopathic serial offenders who plan their crimes methodically and can execute them without overt chaos. They often appear quite normal before and after the crime, showing an ability to resume routine activities as if nothing happened. absnews.go.com, something Getreu indeed did, as he continued working and living normally in Palo Alto after each murder. It is worth noting that during the 1970s, the Bay Area was unfortunately notorious for serial killers, the Zodiac, Edmund Kemper, etc. And the fear on Stanford's campus was palpable. stanfordmag.org. John Getreu's crimes contributed to that climate of terror, but ironically, he managed to escape suspicion entirely. The community looked for monsters in the shadows, not realizing one of the monsters was a quiet, married father who lived among them. This speaks to a psychological ability on Getreu's part to camouflage himself. Even as he committed these horrific acts, he did not present outward signs of aberrant behavior that drew attention. In the era before modern offender profiling, he simply did not fit the then typical image of a deranged killer. Rather than a deranged-looking loner, he was, to all appearances, a regular guy, a fact that would only become clear later when his identity was finally revealed. As criminologist Pat Brown explains, many serial killers defy the perception that they are social outsiders. They often assimilate within society and are skilled in not bringing attention to their secret lives. abcnews.go.com. They are typically psychopaths, not psychotics, meaning they understand reality and societal norms and can act perfectly sane, all while harboring a cold, heartless inner self that commits atrocities in secret. abcnews.go.com. John Getreu's success in evading capture in 1973-74 suggests he was exactly this type of offender, rational, controlled, and extremely dangerous, because he gave little outward indication of his capacity for evil. The murders of Leslie Perloff and Janet Taylor would remain unsolved for over 40 years. Only in 2018 did modern DNA technology finally identify Getreu as the source of the semen from those crime scenes in .wikipedia.org and .wikipedia.org. Until that breakthrough, Getreu lived freely, never held accountable for these two young women's deaths. The psychological impact of getting away with those murders likely reinforced Getreu's behavior. Each time he killed without consequence, it may have emboldened his sense of cunning and power. Serial offenders often feel a thrill or empowerment from successfully pulling off their crimes. While we cannot know Getreu's inner thoughts, one can imagine that after 1974, he felt secure that he had committed the perfect crimes. In fact, decades later, He alluded to this when speaking to detectives, expressing surprise that it took so long for them to catch him, almost as if proud of the longevity of his impunity. "Yeah, I knew that. Why it took so damn long," he said when an investigator remarked that he must have known this day of reckoning would come vallow.com. That statement oozes a kind of arrogant satisfaction, as if he had been tallying the years and half-taunting law enforcement for their failure to identify him. It reveals a window into his psyche. Getreu was keenly aware of his evasion of justice and possibly even derived a sense of superiority from it. In summary, the Stanford murders display John Getreu operating at the height of his predatory capabilities. Psychologically, he was acting out a lust murderer script, targeting his preferred victim type, engaging in sexual violence culminating in murder, and then distancing himself from the crimes emotionally and practically. The brutality and personal nature of the killings, strangulation and rape, indicate a strong element of sadistic control in his personality. He enjoyed or felt compelled by the domination and destruction of these women, which fulfilled both a sexual desire and a power fantasy. At the same time, his ability to remain uncaught points to meticulous self-control and planning, a duality often seen in organized serial killers who can appear perfectly normal in daily life while committing calculated atrocities in secret. In the next section, we will see how that dual life continued and how another violent incident in 1975 nearly exposed him. Yet ultimately, he still managed to slip back into anonymity for decades. The Palo Alto Assault, 1975, and its aftermath. In 1975, John Getreu's violent proclivities surfaced yet again, this time in an attack that the victim miraculously survived. This incident not only provided another data point in his pattern of behavior, but also served as a turning point in his life. It led to minor legal consequences and personal upheaval, after which Getreu would not be linked to any further crimes for a long time. The 1975 case also underscores Getreu's consistent methods and mindset, as well as the criminal justice system's failure at the time to recognize the true threat he posed. By the mid-1970s, Getreu had involved himself with youth activities, specifically with the Boy Scouts of America. He volunteered as a leader of an Explorer Scout post, a branch of the Boy Scouts for older teens, often co-ed, in Palo Alto and .wikipedia.org. This role put him in direct contact with adolescents and presumably in a position of trust and authority over them. It is a striking choice for someone with Getreu's history, a convicted rapist killer of a teenage girl. It's highly likely that no one in Palo Alto was aware of his German conviction. Background checks were far less rigorous in that era, especially for crimes committed abroad. So, Getreu was able to insert himself into a mentorship role with youths, a scenario rife with potential for abuse. From a psychological standpoint, this can be seen as target-rich environment for him. He may have been drawn to the Scouts as a way to access potential victims or simply because he enjoyed the respectability it conferred while knowing his own dark interests. Many predators seek out positions, teacher, coach, clergy, scout leader, etc., that provide both cover and opportunity, and Getreu appears to have done exactly that. In September 1975, a 17-year-old girl, one of the Explorer Scouts under Getreu's supervision, accused him of a brutal sexual assault. The young woman, publicly referred to by the pseudonym Diane Doe in later reportspeople.com, reported that Getreu had raped her in her own home, strangled her until she lost consciousness, and threatened to kill her if she made any noise or told anyone rwcpulse.com or rwcpulse.com. This attack bore an eerie resemblance to Getreu's earlier crimes. The victim was a teenage female, the attack involved strangulation and rape, and the assailant used terror and threats to control the victim. In fact, Diane Doe testified years later that during the assault, Getreu choked her and warned he would kill her if she didn't comply rwcpulse.com. It was only through courage and fortune that she survived. Perhaps he was interrupted, or maybe he decided to spare her life thinking his intimidation was enough to ensure her silence. If the latter, it was a serious miscalculation on his part. She did not stay silent. She reported the crime and Getreu was arrested by the Palo Alto police. Faced with this accusation, Getreu once again attempted to minimize and deflect. During questioning by police at the time, he denied any wrongdoing. Ultimately, however, the evidence and the victim's account were strong enough that Getreu struck a deal with prosecutors. He agreed to plead guilty to a reduced charge of statutory rape, essentially admitting to unlawful sex with a minor who was below California's age of consent, which was 18, while sidestepping the harsher charges of forcible rape and attempted murder, RBCPulse.com. This plea bargain greatly benefited him. He was convicted, but of a relatively lesser offense. The court sentenced him to 6 months in county jail and allowed him to serve that time on weekends, meaning he was free on weekdays, RWCPulse.com. In addition, he paid an administrative fine in .wikipedia.org. To any outside observer, this was a shockingly lenient outcome for a man who in reality had nearly strangled a girl to death during a rape. But because the case was effectively handled as a sex crime, without emphasis on the life-threatening violence, Getreu escaped with what amounted to a slap on the wrist. John Getreu's reaction to this punishment further illuminates his psychological makeup. According to later testimony, he told investigators that the whole incident was so piddly and that he didn't serve any time that he knew of, RUCPulse.com, an attempt to downplay the severity of what he'd done. Calling the episode piddly, a trivial thing, is jarring, considering a teenage girl was traumatized and nearly killed. This choice of words reveals his utter lack of remorse and his refusal to acknowledge the gravity of his actions. It is consistent with the callousness noted in psychopathic personalities. They often regard their misdeeds as inconsequential and feel that any punishment is undeserved or excessive. In Getreu's mind, apparently, the matter was minor enough to forget about once his nominal sentence was done. This casual dismissal of a very serious crime speaks volumes about his empathy, or lack thereof. He had none for his victim. It also highlights his sense of entitlement. He seemed to consider himself the real victim of an inconvenience. As the A&D True Crime Analysis on blame shifting points out, if you're going to shift the blame, it suggests a lack of compassion and empathy, AETV.com. And indeed, Getreu's minimizing language indicates he felt no compassion for the girl he harmed, only annoyance at being held accountable at all. The consequences of the 1975 assault did ripple through Getreu's personal life, however. His wife, Susan, who had presumably been unaware of his dark side until this event, divorced him following his conviction in .wikipedia.org. It is telling that Susan immediately ended the marriage. One can surmise she was horrified by what she learned. This was likely a rare moment where Getreu's two worlds collided. His respectable family man facade was briefly shattered by a criminal revelation. Psychologically, such exposure is threatening to individuals like Getreu, who invest great effort in maintaining their mask of normalcy. The divorce and public disgrace in Palo Alto may have prompted him to lay low and relocate to escape scrutiny. Indeed, after 1975, Getreu left Palo Alto. By 1978, he had moved back to his hometown area in Ohio, where he soon remarried to a woman named Linda, and .wikipedia.org. This geographic and social shift effectively allowed him to start fresh, away from the stigma of the Palo Alto incident. From a criminal psychology perspective, the 1975 assault is significant as a stressor and possible inflection point. Up until then, Getreu had escalated his violence, from one murder in 1963 to 2 murders in 73-74, then this attempted murder in 1975. He might have continued on that trajectory, but getting caught, even in a limited way, could have influenced his behavior going forward. There are a few possible interpretations. Fear of consequences. It's plausible that being arrested and briefly jailed in 1975 scared Getreu enough that he decided to curb his criminal activity. Psychopaths are often described as lacking fear, but they are not immune to self-interest. Knowing that one more slip-up could result in a long prison term might have made him more cautious. After all, by 1975 he had a child, or was about to, and other stakes that might deter him from risking everything again. His comment, "I know why it took so damn long to be caught." Years later, RRDUPulse.com suggests he was well aware that his crimes could catch up to him. Perhaps in 1975 he felt he'd gotten a lucky break and shouldn't push it further.